The word Feng-Shui, or Pungsu as we call it in Korea, is by now pretty well known in the Western world too, especially as the form of trendy Feng Shui interior. It is a miniature version of Feng Shui originated from Hong Kong, where the jam-packed urban condition made the original form of Feng Shui obsolete. Feng Shui at its very basic is understanding the geography with its mountains, rivers, streams and fields as a living organic being. It has its own ways and pattern of qi or energy flowing around as blood would through the veins in animals. There will be spots where lucky or unlucky energy flows and accumulates, and choosing the right spot to live or to be buried would have a strong implication for you and your family's fortune and misfortunes. It may all sound like a BS, but it's not too difficult to imagine Feng Shui starting as a very simple, even scientific reasoning at the beginning. People in the past had to rely on given nature much more than today, and it would have been crucial to find a suitable natural condition to build a house or a town. One of the best-known mantra of Feng Shui, for example, is a mountain in the back and water in the front. Having an easier access to water source was naturally crucial, and having a mountain at the back would not only reduce the exposure from the harsh winter gusts, but also provide firewood and other edibles. The combined condition providing natural defense line against potential invasion is another benefit. But it's human nature that we remember a story much more easily than dry facts. And the simple wisdom of finding the best plot in the given geography has developed into more dramatic, or shall I say sexy, Feng Shui, which combines elaborate Zen element and superstitions on the top. Feng Shui in Korea is believed to have first become popularized in the late Silla dynasty around 9th century, influenced by Tang dynasty. It quickly adopted and developed to suit the densely mountainous character of the land. At the beginning, the emphasis of Feng Shui was in finding a good spot for the living, namely for houses and towns. But into the mid-Joseon dynasty around 16th century, it shifted to more for the dead, namely for tombs. It coincides with the family dynamics getting more and more patriarchal at the time. As the male dominance in the family becoming more important, the emphasis on male lineage and the concept of family clan got stronger, and once much simpler and more practical funeral and memorial ritual also got more elaborate. Feng Shui caring more for the dead than the living was a natural consequence. It is believed if you manage to find a lucky burial plot for your dead family member, the dead would rest peacefully and the descendants would in turn be blessed with a good fortune for the generations to come, first and foremost in the form of bright sons who would bring glory to the family clan with their successful career. What consists a good burial ground is a complex subject that requires an expert Feng Shui guru, but some of more commonly accepted beliefs are it should be sunny and dry, while water and tree roots are two of the big no-nos. The craze of finding the lucky burial plot became a social issue towards the end of Joseon dynasty, and there are plenty of stories and folklores about people stealing other families' burial plot, being scammed by a con Feng Shui guru, or sacrificing their life just to find the prime spot for their dead parents' tomb. Even today, many Koreans would still think about a burial plot when they hear the word Feng Shui. Even though most people neither practice nor believe in it anymore, which is only natural when most people are cremated or buried in the public cemetery nowadays. And yet, it's still not uncommon to see news articles on major newspapers during a presidential election season that discuss ancestral tombs of the main candidates according to Feng Shui. So I selected 5 weird stories about Feng Shui from Korea. It's a deliberately mixed bunch to show different aspects of Feng Shui over the time. From its origin story to a couple of satirical folklores from the past to some modern accounts that are supposed to show how a choice of a burial ground for the dead could affect the living. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by host, Anthony. Tosan was a Buddhist monk from 9th century and is widely considered as one who found Feng-Shui in Korea. His legendary name is often associated with all sorts of mythical stories. His birth myth is almost akin to that of a king, for example. His mother is said to have conceived him by eating a cucumber or melon as she was instructed in her dream. It was a scandal for an unmarried maiden to have a child, so the ashamed mother left the newborn son in the mountain. But when she changed her heart and went to take him back the next day, she found a dozen white doves covering the baby to keep him from cold. The west coast town Tosan grew up had active trade with the Tang dynasty, and then very fashionable feng shui from Tang would have influenced him from the early age. It was the time when previously dominant, more aristocratic and scripture-based Buddhism was shifting towards Zen Buddhism, which emphasizes individual training and revelation. Feng Shui was often used by monks from Tang dynasty as means to attract ordinary people's interest in this new school of Buddhism. Tosan became a monk at 14 and 4 years later achieved his revelation. It was a common practice for a young monk who finished his training to take a period of asceticism traveling across the country. It must have been a good opportunity for young Tosan to deepen his knowledge of feng shui and apply it in real life. Wandering up and down the land, he developed an organic understanding of the country's geography and left records of them. Departing from more dogmatic feng shui from Tang dynasty, he developed more flexible view that the feng shui was not necessarily set in stone. He built pagodas and temples to reshape and improve the flow of the fortune and qi of the given landscapes, which actually is akin to the concept of modern feng shui interior. His reputation grew so much even before he turned 40 that the king himself appointed him as the royal monk. One of the most famous anecdotes of Tosan is that he paved the way for the birth of the future king. On his way back from Paektu Mountain, Tosan was passing by the site where the local lord was building his new house. "He is planting grass on the plot suitable for a big tree." The wife of the lord overheard the passing comment of Tosan and invited the monk graciously, seeking his further advice. Tosan duly surveyed the landscape around and said, "This plot is graced with a qi all the way from Paektu Mountain. Your Highness was born with the energy of water, so respecting the number of water, 36, build a house with 36 sections, and plant a pine grove to block the harsh energy from the rocky Songak Mountain. And a harmonious result shall bring you a precious son in a year. Name him Wangan." As Tosan predicted, indeed a son arrived in the family, and Wangan later became the founder of the new Korea dynasty in 918. Spirituality runs in my family from my father's side. Both my great-grandmother and grandmother were professional shamans and were locally well known. Probably for that reason, I too seem to have a vague third eye and have observed strange things occasionally firsthand from my childhood. This one's from back when I was 9. I often visited my grandparents in the countryside. At the edge of the village was a sizable dairy farm with 50 or so cows. I was friendly with the son of the family. Well, there were just few kids of my age in the whole village, so he was my pal whenever I visited there. So, as usual, I visited the farm to see the friend. As I approached, I heard the cows crying and stirring from the barn where they were kept. It wasn't uncommon that I and my buddies spending time in the barn to pet and feed cows, so I went in to check what was going on. I saw the back of an old man. He was holding a cow by its horn, and then suddenly he pushed a hand through the cow's backside, stirred around, and pulled out. The poor cow dribbled and collapsed on the ground as the result. The old man turned around at my gasp. His face was horrendous. I still see it in my nightmares occasionally. His eyes were rotten, bloated, like a person who drowned and rot in the water. I was shocked and ran to my friend's house, but there was nobody, so I ran back to my grandparents. My parents didn't take me seriously. Apparently cows had been dying out in the recent days, and they just thought I saw one dying. But my grandma, who was a retired shaman by then, knew it wasn't as simple as that. "Poor child, you two were born with a gift," she said, and took me back to the farm. She looked around and concluded that my friend's family chose the wrong spot for the late grandfather's tomb, and his angry spirit was taking it out on the cows. She urged the family to check on the tomb, and indeed the waterway to the farming field nearby was compromised and the water was flowing over to the tomb. One could see the ground around the tomb saturated with water from the surface already. It naturally took some time to find a new plot for the tomb, and meanwhile they lost 3 more cows in that span of few days. In the Buddhistic temple of Cheontaek-sa in Tongyeong was a spring called Jangun-su, literally meaning the water of general. The water from the spring had a mysterious power that strengthened the physical prowess of the drinker. The monks living in the temple drank the water every day, and their strong physique became legendary, that they could run all the way from the beach to the temple in the mountain carrying 2 sacks of rice on each side. But over the time, the monks had got cocky with their superior strength. They abandoned the modesty their religion preached and became more like a mop-up gang robbing townspeople of food and money. Ordinary people could not fight off the superhuman monks, nor could forces from the government authority. Against the monks, all the bows, spears, and swords did little good. Monks grew only cockier and more violent. One day, a famous Feng-Shui guru came by Tongyeong, and the desperate townspeople pleaded him to stop the delinquents of the temple. Surprisingly, the monks came to visit the guru first to make a request.
"We hear you're the master of Feng Shui. We'd like to invite you to our temple and see if there's anything we could improve for a more prosperous future of the establishment."
Apparently their greed knew no end. But the guru had a better idea and said,
"They can open up the hill west to the temple. It shall open up the flow of the energy from the earth and bring even greater luck to the temple."
The monks were satisfied and paid the guru handsomely. It goes without saying the guru didn't wait to see what was to come. The monks digged out the westerly hill for 3 days and nights. Suddenly, water sprung out from the ground as scarlet as blood. With that, the miracle spring in the temple dried up, and the whole temple was attacked by a swarm of bed bugs. Even the strongest of the monks could not stand constant bites from the endless flow of bed bugs, and in the end they all ran away, leaving the temple deserted. The miracle spring was lost for the greed of human, but at least the townspeople could resume their peaceful life once again. In a small village in Poon, 2001, Kim hired a Feng-Shui master to look for a suitable plot for his late mother's tomb. The master pointed one spot and called it the most precious plot, which would bring prosperity in the family for the generations to come. But it wasn't quite so simple.
It is indeed the best plot for the family, but putting a tomb here could bring a bad luck to your village. Well, I'm not in a position to tell you what to do, but think it over carefully,
said the master. So Kim thought to sleep it over and went back home. That night he had a dream. His late mother appeared and called for her son with a grim face.
Mother, your face, are you not well?
Kim asked.
No, I'm fine. It will be all fine when we move into the new place,
Mother said. Kim interpreted the dream as his late mother liking the plot he checked out earlier, so he buried her there in the end. A few months passed, and into the next year, people started dying off in the village. In the small village with mere 50 households, a young husband died, and then his wife in quick succession. A kid of another family followed, and another lady fell off a cliff to her death. Into the first couple of months of the new year, 9 villagers perished under various circumstances. It was enough to stir up the small village, and all sorts of outlandish rumors were rampant among the inhabitants. Kim started feeling guilty. There was no proof, but after all, didn't the Feng Shui master warn him? In the end, he decided to exhume his mother and move to a different spot. But on the appointed date, what Kim found was an empty hole where the tomb should be. The body was nowhere to be found. Kim was shocked, but he came up with a potential culprit, the leader of the village. He marched to his house and called out. Nobody answered, but that didn't put Kim off given the situation. He searched around the house and found the body of his mother. Kim was understandably mad.
Are you nuts? How dare you dig out my mom without my consent?
But the reaction from the village leader was equally heated.
You think I don't know? Same thing happened 20 years ago. The Feng Shui master warned you, didn't he? And you chose the plot nevertheless, killing other villagers?
The dispute ended with Kim reporting it to police, and the village leader and 11 others involved with the illegal exhumation was arrested. This weird story reached the national news, but what makes it more than just a happening among the superstitious country folks is, indeed there were no more mysterious deaths in the village after the exhumation. Was it just a coincidence? Lee Ji-ham was a scholar in 16th century Joseon dynasty. His interests were broad and flexible, unlike most other mainstream Neo-Confucius scholars, and freely delved into Taoism and mysticism. His eccentric character was so legendary that his name is associated with various rumors and stories which are most likely not true. The following story is one such. A young man had just lost his mother. He wished to find the best possible plot for her burial, but he was too poor to buy a Feng-Shui guru's advice. So he turned to 100-day praying for help from heaven. Nearly the end of the 100th day, 2 wandering Buddhist monks came by his house. Long before the development of transportation and commercial inns, it was common that travelers seeking food and shelter by a random household on their way. So the young man offered the monks a room and went back to his praying at his backyard. "Pray, do let me come across a great master like Ham, and may he lend me his wisdom to find a great plot for my late mother." And what a coincidence! None other than Ijiam himself was passing by and happened to overhear the young man's mentioning his name. It triggered his interest, so he stopped by the young man's house pretending to be a traveler.
Young man, pray, I'm starving. Could you give me something to eat?
Ijiam said. The good-hearted young man wanted to serve his guests nicely, but he barely had enough to feed himself. In the end, he cooked a bowl of rice he reserved as the offering to heaven and served it to his 3 guests. Sharing this modest dinner, Ijiam chatted up the 2 monks.
I think our young host has lost his mother and is seeking a nice plot for her tomb. I unfortunately have no idea in that area, but perhaps you 2 could help him?
"Yes, indeed," said one monk. "As we walking down the mountain over there, we did spot a suitable plot. It will give our host in 10 years prosperity and many sons with bright future."
In 10 years? But what about his dinner tonight?
Ijiam asked. He then called for his host and said,
I'm still starving. Stop worrying about your late mother, and I'm going to give you an advice to get rich right today. Isn't there a widow in your neighborhood?
Yes, there is one, said the young man.
Go to her and borrow some rice,
Ijiam instructed. So the young man went to the widow neighbor and asked for help. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I have 3 guests in the house tonight and I have nothing to feed them. Could you lend me some rice? Knowing the reputation of the young man as a good, kind-hearted man, the widow gladly offered him a small bag of rice. But before he could take it over, she held his hand and said, Young man, I know you are a good man. Why don't you live with me, huh? The young man was too shy, but the woman insisted, grabbing his hand even harder, and in the end, he gave his consent. Seeing his host bringing in a big bowl of steaming rice, Ijiham said with a smile,
See, you are getting married now, are you not? No more worry about what to eat every evening.
He then turned to the monks.
You, sirs, only learned from your books. What's the use if a fortune awaits in 10 years when you're starving right this evening? My wisdom is how to feed yourself today.
Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for your listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. It was slightly different kind of subject than usual, but I think Feng Shui, especially as an art of finding a burial plot, is definitely a part of complex fabric of family dynamics and relationship in Korea. Again, it's a dying tradition in modern Korea, as with a traditional patriarchy, but I believe a tradition doesn't just die away. As already mentioned the last time, my family is pretty conservative, and my great-grand and grandparents are buried in the traditional fashion in the mountain in their home village. I hear even my father already has an appointed plot in the same mountain when his time comes. Have that brought prosperity to my family clan? I'm not too sure about that. Anyway, is there any particular rules and taboos regarding a burial in your culture too? Do let me know in the comments. It would be most interesting to learn. Next week, I'm going to read you one weird and whimsical story that once again shows how a dead ancestor could influence the descendant's life. So stay tuned. If you enjoyed my work, please give my little channel a boost with a thumbs up and comments, and consider activating the notification bell and subscribing to my channel. It all helps me greatly. Thank you. Until the next, stay safe and take care.